from the studios of Farm Journal Broadcast.
A fresh gauge of farmers' sentiment sets expectations as harvest continues. Another hurricane could threaten the southeast while fires burn in the west. In agribusiness, end users are getting a deal.
Now's the time to be buying corn and beans seasonally.
Wisconsin cheesemakers donate help to victims of Harvey and step into the shoes of Alice in Dairyland.
AgDay, presented by the Chevy Silverado. High-strength steel for high-strength dependability.
Good morning, I'm Clinton Griffiths. Anemic grain prices continue to weigh heavily on grain farmers' perceptions about the farm economy, yet there continues to be a glimmer of hope for profitability. Purdue University and the CME Group releasing its monthly Ag Economy Barometer, the economic indicator dipping to 132 points. That's 7 points below the July reading. While the sentiment index dropped, it's still stronger than a year ago when the index was sitting at just 95 points. According to Purdue economists who conduct the survey, the change in sentiment in August is largely driven by a decline in the index of current conditions, now one of the sub-indices of the overall barometer.
And in August, the index of current conditions, this kind of short-run look of sentiment, was down 20 points, from about 142 down to 122 points, while the index of future expectations, a forward measure of sentiment, has been mostly sideways. Kind of the background here, what we've been seeing going on broadly in the ag economy is that commodity markets, especially on the grain side, have trended lower since peaking out in early July.
Despite the decline in the index of current conditions, the Purdue CME Ag Barometer seems to indicate that agricultural producers remain more upbeat about prospects for their own farms, as well as the agricultural sector, than they were at this time last year. In an exclusive early look at the publication, the feed Farmer Mac says they're watching the farm economy closely as well, and while there's been a slight uptick in bankruptcies and delinquencies, overall the ag economy is hanging tough.
Well, I got to give the ag economy somewhat of like a B-, maybe upgraded from a C earlier this year, just because we have seen the livestock, that half of the ag sector is doing much better than we expected. So they're kind of raising the tide a little bit.
If you would like to get a copy of the latest edition of The Feed, Farmer Mac's quarterly perspective on ag, visit farmermac.com.
I think right now it's a little bit too early to tell, but it's a good time to be prepared.
Get prepared. That message coming up from officials in Florida, including Commissioner of Agriculture Adam Putnam. Hurricane Irma strengthening in the Atlantic, growing to Category 5 status with max sustained winds of 180 miles per hour. Now, if it continues to track to the west, it could make landfall, including Florida or the East Coast by the weekend. Hurricane concerns also has cotton starting off the week in the green. Some contracts climbing up to $3 higher during Tuesday's trade. Another indicator, China. Now, according to Reuters, China banning its trading firms from buying cotton at its own national reserves until the end of the month. Analysts say the move could help keep markets higher until China dips back into those domestic reserves.
They're essentially giving a green light to all the private users there in China to be accessing the export markets, which really, from an old crop perspective, we don't have a lot available. Carry out for this next year's crop is 5.8 billion, less all the damage from the hurricanes. Carry out for this old crop right now is sitting around 3 billion, or 3 million bales rather. So a lot of tight old crop stocks here and not a lot of understanding about where China's going to go for current needs.
Payne says Irma would have to do some major damage to the cotton crop in the southeast to pull cotton futures higher. That's because there looks to be a strong crop in northwest Texas. USDA giving us a fresh update on the condition of the cotton crop in this week's crop progress report. Despite damage to cotton from Hurricane Harvey, USDA says the Texas cotton crop actually improved by a point compared to last week. NESS says 59% is now good to excellent. Overall, the nation's cotton, 65% good to excellent. We see bolls opening on a quarter of the crop. That's 5 points behind the 5-year average. Now looking at corn, 61% is called good to excellent. That's down a point from a week ago. State by state, it's a mixed bag. Illinois and Iowa conditions gained, but Indiana and Minnesota are down. But the real story is maturity. Overall, it's 6 points behind. All of the top corn states are behind. Illinois and Iowa both 13 points behind. And looking at soybeans, condition ratings, were unchanged. 61% of that crop good to excellent. Illinois, Iowa, Minnesota, all 1 point higher. As far as maturity goes, 11% now starting to drop leaves, just a point behind average. NASS continuing to compile data for upcoming reports. However, number crunchers at the Statistics Service say response rates to surveys have been decent but could be better. In August, around 70% of farmers returned the USDA survey. Officials say their data can be better if more responses come in.
It's definitely difficult. I mean, a lot of this is personal information, and we understand that. Sometimes they just don't have time. They're busy in the field, and that's a factor too. But it has been a trend that's been going down over the last few years. I feel like we feel like it's stabilized at about that 72-73% range. Obviously, certain areas are lower, some areas are higher.
Hawthorne says in general, NASS doesn't want a response rate much lower than they have right now. Congress has returned to Washington for its post-Labor Day run through the end of the year. USDA pushing forward and filling its ranks, officially nominating Iowa Secretary of Ag Bill Northey to be Undersecretary for Farm Production and Conservation at the USDA. Now, over the holiday, the grain industry reacting to word that the Trump administration is threatening to leave the Korea Free Trade Agreement, or KORUS. The U.S. Grains Council and others speaking out, urging the administration not to withdraw from the deal. South Korea is currently the U.S. third largest corn customer.
We're just literally watching the flames get closer and closer to our home.
Meanwhile, in the western U.S., evacuations are underway as firefighters struggle with wind-driven flames, hot temperatures, and dry conditions. This fire in Oregon is along the Columbia River Gorge that separates Oregon from Washington in the Willamette National Forest. Alone, nearly 50,000 acres have burned in that fire. Two popular national parks, Glacier and Yosemite, also fighting wildfires. The dozen or more fires out west blanketing the air with smoke from Oregon to Colorado. Health officials in many places issuing air quality advisory alerts. Mike Hoffman joining us now to look at crop comments, including some crops full of pests. Mike?
Thanks, Clinton. Here's a picture from Jeff Harold of Valparaiso, Indiana. He says this looks like grass seed on the head of the combine, but it's actually aphids. He says almost every field has them. And Jonathan Denzel of Wallace County, Kansas, sending us this great photo of his son Jarek checking out his crop this year. Jonathan says the dryland corn in the area is about 2 weeks from the black layer stage and on track to be a good crop. Now, taking a look at the root zone moisture, you can see still wet, obviously, in parts of Texas, Louisiana, and on up into Kentucky and Tennessee, but it has dried out most of the plains. We'll take a closer look at this and have your forecast coming up. First, here are some hometown temps.
Visit FarmJournalPro.com. Trusted analysis, professional insight. FarmJournalPro.com.
After the break, we'll talk with Bob Utterback about the good news for livestock owners regarding current grain prices and why they may not want to miss an opportunity. And later, meet an advocate for farmers in the dairy state of Wisconsin. A day with Alice in Dairyland, coming up on In the Country.
Join us on the U.S. Farm Report Facebook page, Friday, September 8th at 10 a.m. Central Time for Foliar Health Focus. We'll have experts live in the field discussing proactive disease control strategies that worked this year and ways to boost your yield in 2018.
Agribusiness news, the Climate Corporation has finished the deal to sell its precision planting technology to AGCO. The Climate Corporation, a subsidiary of Monsanto, the companies announced the closing on Tuesday. It was just 2 months ago when they first announced that transaction. With the Dow seeing triple-digit drops during Tuesday's trading day, commodities saw plenty of green. Cotton wasn't alone. Let's get details from the floor.
The lean hog market was sharply higher here on Tuesday following a long holiday weekend. As a matter of fact, most of your front month contracts traded limit up at one point here on Tuesday, so a very sharp turnaround here to begin a new week. Remember that just last week the hog market had posted some fresh 10-month lows, so a very, very sharp recovery here to begin the week. Soybean market was sharply higher here on Tuesday following a long holiday weekend. The November contract traded into some pre-USDA report levels. Remember, we had a very bearish report from USDA on August 10th, We saw a pretty sharp sell-off following that, but during the last couple of trading days, we were able to erase those losses and again trade at those pre-report levels. So the market acting very, very well despite some larger U.S. production prospects. Now, I think that part of the game here is just that, U.S. production and exactly what we're going to end up with. Again, Joe Vaclavic from CME Group here in Chicago.
Joining me now is Bob Utterback, Utterback Marketing. Bob, as we start to talk about these grain markets, you know, obviously grain growers would love to see the prices move higher. Right. But there's another side of ag, right? The people that buy that grain and they use it to feed livestock. And this has been a pretty good stretch for folks trying to feed livestock.
And we're moving now into the time of year between September and October, mid-October, when we should be historically the weakest time. That's when the basis is the widest, the flat price is getting all this dump inventory, and as feed buyers, which we mean we want to buy it and look for a seasonal rally from the September to next July, now's the time to be buying corn and beans seasonally. Frankly, I think the corn will try to rally after the September report and bounce up into December and then chop until we know the acres. Whereas beans, we could go a little lower into September, October on bigger yield. But I think beans has got the brighter story long term because of demand.
Sure.
And obviously acres have equation. So both have some really strong merit. Feed buyers, I think you should be buying soybean meal or buying the deferred November beans. Here, $9.20 or lower, and have everything done by the last September 1st, October, whereas corn probably should get started here. I would buy in the money lead month calls and scale down by and be done by late September, early October. So there's a great opportunity to re-own for feed needs, re-own for if you had to sell the combine. There's a positive, or if you're trying to add value to your crop. But make sure you have a plan of attack, you're actually cash flowed, and don't go overboard. This is not cowboy time period. This is time to be good used management tools. I like buying in the money calls.
All right, don't go overboard, but get going. This is a good time for it.
It's time to get started.
All right.
Put the bear aside.
That's right. Thanks, Bob. We'll be back with more Ag Day in just a minute.
To talk with Bob one-on-one, call Utterback Marketing Services, toll free at 800-832-1488. Ag Day weather, brought to you by Credenz soybean seed from Bayer.
Welcome back to Ag Day. Meteorologist Mike Hoffman looking at this root zone moisture map, and you can really see there, Mike, in central Illinois, southeast Iowa, where it's dried out some.
Yeah, it really has, and you had mentioned that that's kind of hurt filling out the beans a little bit, but that wet area from the hurricane, obviously on up into the Tennessee and Ohio valleys, you can pick out that pretty well also. It's also dried out in most of the plains. This was a large blue area last week from Nebraska into Minnesota, so it has started to dry out. And obviously, if we're going to be watching Irma, that could make a huge difference in a week's time here on exactly how wet things are in parts of the southeast. Here's the map as we start today. Strong cold front all the way into the southeast off the eastern seaboard. Secondary front kind of bringing another shot of chilly air with it. And a third front will be coming out of central Canada. That will bring another shot of cool air. This is going to be a very chilly weather pattern for the next several days for the Great Lakes in the Northeast for this time of the year. And even this first front is going to bring some showers and thunderstorms with it and a pretty good cool down, much less humidity anyway behind it. And I'm sure a lot of you folks in the Southeast are saying that's great news. High pressure then building into the southwestern Great Lakes as we head into tomorrow morning, and there's that secondary front. We do have a weak cool front trying to come into the west coast. May bring a few showers as we head through tomorrow afternoon. The showers in the Great Lakes from the northeast will continue off and on, along with the chilly temperatures. There's a precipitation estimate over the past 24 hours. You can see it up and down the Appalachians. That's the general area that's had the most. Over the next 36 hours, we'll add a little bit more in parts of the southeast, especially South Florida. That's not from Irma yet. That's going to be over the weekend, perhaps. All depends on the track. And we'll see light amounts across parts of the Great Lakes. Much less moisture off to the west, though, as you can see. High temperatures today, look at this. For early September, highs only in the lower 60s, most of the Great Lakes, even 60s all the way down into Kentucky and Tennessee for high temperatures. I mean, that's pretty chilly for this time of the year. Low temperatures tonight going to drop off into the 40s and 50s. Great Lakes all the way down into the Ohio Valley, and the chilly or the warm humid air you can see is just shoved all the way into the Gulf of Mexico. Highs tomorrow afternoon. We'll start to see some 70s coming back into the northwestern plains, but still 50s and 60s, Great Lakes northeast. That's all because of that trough right there. You can see it kind of holds its ground for a while. You can also see where this computer model is taking Irma kind of up the eastern seaboard of Florida. Again, we don't know exactly where that's headed. We'll be watching that for you, though. But you can see the trough redevelops after a ridge tries to come into the Great Lakes. That's a look across the country. Now let's take a look at some local forecasts. First of all, Austin, Nevada, partly sunny, rather warm, high of 83 degrees. Hastings, Nebraska, a good deal of sunshine, really nice, high of 72. And finally, Portsmouth, Ohio, a mixture of sunshine and clouds on the cool side, high of just 70.
Dairy producers pitch in for Harvey. We'll tell you about the cheese rolling to Texas after the break. And later, meet Alice in Dairyland, a Wisconsin tradition with a mission for farmers. On the Dairy Report, butter and cheese prices climbing at the Global Dairy Trade Auction in New Zealand this week. Butter rising about 4% to $2.70 a pound. Cheddar cheese up to $1.87. However, both skim and whole milk powders fell during that auction. On Tuesday, the president putting the DACA program, or the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, in the hands of Congress. Administration announcing plans to end the program, but delaying that for 6 months in order to give lawmakers time to come up with a permanent solution. A new report from Rabobank predicts the U.S. beef cattle herd will increase about 2% over the next few years. That report says expanding beef production will help meet the needs for exports. However, somewhere in the year 2020 to 2025, Rabobank is expecting increased supplies of both beef and poultry, and say that could cause negative price pressure, making it difficult for producers to justify retaining more replacement heifers. While cleanup continues in Texas following Hurricane Harvey, support and donations are pouring into the Lone Star State. Wisconsin cheesemakers announcing plans to send nearly 20,000 pounds of cheese to Houston. The effort, coordinated by the Wisconsin Milk Marketing Board and funded by the Dairy Farm Families of Wisconsin, they originally had hoped to gather 200 pounds to ship, but giving surged above and beyond expectations. They also plan to ship about 300 pounds of butter. All right, when we come back, we'll have more from Wisconsin, including getting to know Alice in Dairyland.
In the Country, brought to you by Kubota's M5 series, bringing new levels of comfort to hard work. Learn more at Kubota.com or visit your local Kubota dealer today.
Wisconsin's newest agricultural ambassador is quite busy these days, crisscrossing the state to promote the wide variety of ag products you can find there. And while the word dairy is part of the title, Alice in Dairyland, the job entails much more than the state's famed dairy industry. In this video from the Wisconsin Milk Marketing Board, we try to keep up with Alice.
My name is Crystal Seamers-Peterman, and I'm Wisconsin's 70th Alice in Dairyland. And what an honor to be here at the Dane County Fair.
Crystal Seamers-Peterman is busy fulfilling her duties as Alice in Dairyland, and the first stop in her busy schedule is the Dane County Fair.
All right, Abby, can you tell me about your heifer? What's her name? Millie. Millie? And what breed is Millie? Holstein.
It's just one of the stops during an average day in the life of Alice in Dairyland.
You know, there really isn't any average day for Alice in Dairyland, and that's probably one of my favorite parts. Some days I'll have really early mornings, and other days I'll be in the middle of the afternoon, I'll have an event. So my calendar is crazy.
A Ford Explorer is home base, serving multiple functions such as closet, office, and hauler. She logs a lot of miles to help spread the word about Wisconsin's $88 billion agriculture industry.
I'm hoping to hit a little over 35,000 miles, and that'll be through my entire year. So it's really hard to pinpoint where I am because I travel a lot and I spend a lot of time in this vehicle, but it's so worth it.
From media interviews to public appearances to attending agriculture community events, you'll be able to find Alice in Dairyland all over the state, shining the spotlight on Wisconsin agriculture.
Although I might wear a tiara on my head, I have an important job to represent Wisconsin agriculture.
And that's Wisconsin Dairy News.
Crystal grew up on her family's Holstein dairy farm in Manitowoc County, about an hour south of Green Bay. That's all the time we have this morning. We're sure glad you tuned in. Start your day with us. For Mike Hoffman and all of us here at AgDay, I'm Clinton Griffiths. Have a great day.
AgDay is powered by Ram Trucks, America's longest lasting pickups.